Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Welcome, dear listener, to Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Set aside some moments now and take an adventurous ride on a journey into the psyche of some talented writers. They will dig into your being and titillate you. Oh, I love that word, titillate. While the stories may not all take place in the Heartland, I am delivering them to you from the Heartland. My intention is to strike fear and confusion into the mind, soul, and yes, the heart. This is Fear from the Heartland. Welcome, Heartlanders, to Week 6 of Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. My producer, she of NMC Music Creative, my wife, like I let slip last week, says to me, "You made me sound somewhat whiny last week." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then there were the crickets. A quick exit stage left, back to the padded room I went. All is good. I now have a lock on the inside as well. 2 stories tonight come from the uber-talented duo of J.C. Fields and Heath Pfaff. Sometimes the plan isn't the plan. Let's get after it. J. Wendell Boyd is a lawyer at the top of his game. He is slated for greatness and a possible shot at becoming the next United States Attorney General. But life has a way of slapping down even the best laid plans. When serial killer Aaron Morton walks into his office to turn himself in, Boyd discovers how cruel some men can be to their fellow human beings. The experience will shatter his faith in mankind and the law. Now a simple small-town attorney, and years after Morton paid for his crimes, Boyd is starting to be at peace with himself. Then, on the 5th anniversary of Morton's execution, the serial killer's wickedness reaches out from the grave to torment J. Wendell Boyd. May we offer, for your indulgence, They Do Come Back. "25 years ago, I became the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. Brash, arrogant, cocky, and brilliant. I could do no wrong. I prosecuted organized crime figures, brought down corrupt Chicago politicians, and started the first anti-terrorist department in the central United States. As my reputation grew within the U.S. Attorney's Office, I knew it would only be a matter of time before I would be elevated to the Washington, D.C. scene and become the United States Attorney General. It was a lock, or so I thought. My law diploma from the University of Chicago, where I graduated first in my class, showed my name to be J. Wendell Boyd. Associates called me Wendell. Others referred to me as Mr. Boyd. I was at the top of my game. Then, 20 years ago, Aaron Morton walked into my office and changed my life. And I might add, not for the better. I probably should explain. During the first 5 years of my tenure as United States Attorney, Chicago became plagued by a horrendous series of gruesome murders. Since they all occurred in Chicago, their district attorney oversaw the investigation and potential prosecution. While I knew about the homicides, I had other matters on my plate. On October 21st, exactly 20 years ago to this day, my assistant rushed into my office, followed by a clean-shaven, skinny fellow with neatly trimmed blonde hair. I looked over my glasses and stared at the newcomer as he stood in front of my desk. Professionally dressed in a navy pinstripe suit, white silk shirt, and a red and gold tie, he looked and sounded like a successful businessman from the East Coast. "Sir, my name is Aaron Morton. I am a serial killer, and I am here to turn myself in and make a deal." After his surprise statement, I glanced at my assistant, who stood off to the side and appeared ready to soil his pants. I pointed at one of the leather wingback chairs in front of my desk. "Have a seat." After he sat, he crossed his legs at the knee, leaned back, and offered me a half smile. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you, but you'll have to give me a few more details before I can determine my response." "Ah, a skeptic." "No, I am busy and do not have time nor the inclination to play games." "Very well. I am the person responsible for the deaths of 10 men and 10 women. I try to be an equal opportunity killer. I am a trained surgeon, and if you have been reading the newspapers, you will realize all of the victims were dismembered." I leaned back in my chair and brought my arms up to make a steeple with my fingers, tapping my lips. I could feel my heart start to pound. Taking a calming breath, I tried to keep my expression as neutral as possible before I spoke. "Okay, you have my attention, but sources tell me there are only a total of 10 victims. 10 the Chicago police know about. You see, I targeted my prey in your northern Illinois district. I have designed it so the investigation will fall explicitly under your jurisdiction." This revelation gave me pause. I kept my fingers on my lips and stared at the man as he displayed a smile that sent chills down my spine. He continued, "Also, what has not been reported in the media is that of the bodies already discovered, there are various parts missing. They are not complete. Let's just say, I've retained souvenirs." I sat up straighter. The hairs on the back of my neck stood, and I struggled to catch my breath. The reports I received indicated this very fact. The police intentionally withheld this information pending locating a person of interest, but they only knew of 10 victims. He raised an eyebrow. "Ah, I finally have your attention." Regaining my composure with a slight smile, I looked at my assistant, who had not taken his eyes off the man, nor had he moved. "Greg." He blinked several times and finally looked at me. I said, "Would you be so kind as to ask Assistant Attorney Jeffries to join us?" "Yes, sir." After Greg left the office, Morton said, "I will only give my statement to you. You can have as many witnesses as you like, but I will not address anyone but you." "Why?" With a relaxed demeanor, he folded his arms and smiled. "I have my reasons. Until we know for sure about the other victims, I won't be involved." He leaned forward. "Oh, but you have to be involved. You see, your presence will give my crimes the status they deserve." "Do they?" "Wait and see." After a week of following directions provided by Morton, 10 additional bodies were discovered, and the matter did indeed fall under my jurisdiction. I accompanied state and local police plus a state medical examiner to the last 5 sites. I did this because I knew I would have to lead the prosecution of this monster. What I saw at these sites will haunt me until my final days. Once we recovered the last body, I scheduled an interview with Morton, a meeting which did not go well for me. I was escorted into the interrogation room before he arrived. As they brought him in, I almost gasped at the change in his appearance. "I take it you don't like my new look, Boyd? Are you trying to mimic Charles Manson, Aaron?" "Manson was an amateur." Morton's charade as a professional businessman no longer existed. In place of the well-groomed aristocrat, a disheveled, wild-eyed crazy man sat in front of me. His once neatly groomed blonde hair appeared to have been self-cut and at odd and varying lengths. A thick blondish red mustache and goatee now adorned the once clean-shaven face. Tattooed on his left cheek were the words, I am. On his right cheek, the word, God. A little pretentious with your new tattoos, aren't you, Aaron? Am I? Who among us has shown the power of life and death over his fellow man, counselor? With a slight smile, I said, a jury of your peers? Yes, but the process is so lengthy it borders on the absurd. I, on the other hand, can strike at any time and at anybody. I believe the proper tense would be could. For now. I kept my expression neutral as a chill swept over me. Shaking off the feeling his words might be prophetic, I asked, do you want a lawyer? No. Are you going to defend yourself? He only nodded. How did you choose your victims? Excellent question. I said nothing as I waited for his response. The men were simply random. If I didn't like their looks or attitude, well, you know. No, I don't, Aaron. Enlighten me. Have you checked their backgrounds? Of the ones we can identify, yes. Ah. He gave me a wicked smile and changed the subject. Amazing how important a face and hands can be in learning who someone is. Would you agree? If I remember correctly, I did not respond. The women were chosen for two reasons. First, they had to be attractive. Second, they also needed to have money. Age did not matter. Go on. I seduced them, counselor. Once I secured access to their money, well, you saw what happened. Where are the missing body parts? Safe. It took every fiber of my being not to reach over the desk and strangle this monster sitting across from me. His flippant disregard for his victims shook the very core of my humanity. After taking a deep breath, I said, when are you going to tell me where this safe place is? He just sat there and gave me a smug smile. Following this, I performed a very unprofessional act. I stood, walked around, and slapped him. Do you want a drink? Sure, whatever you're having. My father, the Honorable Preston Elwood Boyd, federal appeals judge, said, Johnny Walker Black it is. I heard the clink of 2 ice cubes in a crystal glass, followed by the same sound a second time. I sat in a wingback leather chair positioned in front of his desk at his home office. He handed me my cocktail as I stared at his law library, which occupied the wall on 2 sides of his office. He then sat behind his massive oak desk and said, Why did you slap him? After taking a sip, I studied the liquid in my glass for a few moments. I've been trying to determine the reason ever since it happened. To be honest with you, Father, I don't have a clue. Your mother, God rest her soul, would be pleased you did. I, on the other hand, am surprised you allowed him to get to you. I'm not proud of it. Have you recused yourself? I tried. He won't talk to anyone but me. Then you are facing a legal conundrum. Obviously. Who is this man? He refuses to tell us anything about himself. What we do know, we've been able to piece together. The only background he provided came from a statement he made the first time I spoke to him. He told me he was a trained surgeon. Interesting. It took a while, but one of our investigators determined he dropped out of medical school just before starting his residency at Mount Sinai. Did he have a specialty? Yes, orthopedic surgery. According to our investigator, his grades as a student in medical school were mediocre. In fact, he barely passed. I suppose someone has to be at the bottom of their class? Yes, but he strikes me as highly intelligent. My father remained quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, Are you here seeking my advice? I nodded as I took another sip of my scotch. I enjoy your company, but tonight, it's the reason I'm here. Continue as the main prosecutor, only never be in the same room with him alone. Always have a witness. Wise counsel, Father. The trial of Aaron Morton commenced exactly 1 year from the date he first walked into my office. The court, refusing to allow Morton to represent himself, appointed an attorney from a large firm in Chicago. The trial lasted 3 weeks. My nightmares started the same day we seated a jury. As the chief prosecutor for the Northern District of Illinois, I normally acted as a supervisor for my team and rarely got involved as the lead on a case. With the Aaron Morton trial, I stepped back into my role as a practicing prosecutor. Because of this, I immersed myself into the details of the 20 victims, their lives, their families, and their ultimate gruesome deaths. From what the autopsies revealed, all 20 individuals died a slow and drawn-out demise. Using his training as a physician, Morton kept each one of them alive as long as possible while he dismembered them. I still have trouble discussing this fact, even 20 years later. My argument to the jury began with my opening statement, which summarized the life of each victim prior to crossing paths with this monster. After I finished, I sat and waited for the defense's turn. Morton's attorney stood, turned to the jury and said, "My client concedes the events described by Mr. Boyd did occur." The judge blinked several times, shook his head and asked, "Mr. Turner, is your client changing his plea to guilty at this time?" "No, Your Honor, but he does not contest the information presented by Mr. Boyd." The trial grew more surreal from this point on. Turner never offered a hint of a defense. I, as prosecutor, presented the jury with 2.5 weeks of grisly testimony. I subjected family members of the victims to reliving the loss of their loved ones and how their deaths affected each of them. During my presentation, I would glance at the defendant occasionally to emphasize a point. Every time I did this, he appeared to be enjoying the description of his ghastly acts. When I rested my case, I was utterly and literally drained. The passion I normally felt for my job washed away in the flood of depravity coming from the black soul of Aaron Morton. I could not make myself give the prosecution's closing remarks. I turned those duties over to an assistant. Morton's attorney, Michael Turner, offered only one witness for the defense, Aaron Morton. After he was sworn in, Turner asked him to tell the jury his side of the story. I will never forget what happened next. Morton turned, stared at each member of the jury, and said the following with a devilish smile. "I've been lying to my attorney from the beginning. It happened exactly like J. Wendell Boyd said." Chaos broke out in the courtroom as reporters scrambled out to find a phone or get in front of a camera. I remember the judge banging his gavel on the desk in a vain attempt to quiet the room. Finally, in a desperate move, he ordered the bailiffs to remove Morton from the premises. I remember clasping my hands together in front of me and staring blankly at the tabletop. Thoughts of resigning my position started to formulate in my head as I sat there. Before the commotion caused by Morton's statement settled down, I made the decision I never wanted to deal with anyone like Aaron Morton again. Sentencing for the monster occurred 3 months later. Dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, his hands and legs shackled, he stood at the defendant's table, this time with a rookie public defender standing beside him. They both fixed their attention on the judge. With a condemning glare, Judge Kevin Mayer clasped his hands together and asked, "Before I announce the state's sentence on your actions, Mr. Morton, do you have anything to say?" Morton did not hesitate. He turned and stared directly at me. "This isn't over, Boyd. You will never be rid of me. Even in death, I will haunt you for eternity." My stomach clenched with these words. Apparently, my face displayed my sudden fear as Morton grinned devilishly and returned his attention to the judge. Rolling his eyes, Judge Mayer said, "I was hoping for an expression or hint of remorse. Obviously, you are not capable of such sentiments. Very well." He picked up a piece of paper and read, "Aaron Morton, you are accused of the brutal murders of the following Illinois citizens." He read the names slowly, making sure he mentioned each victim's spouse, siblings, or parents. "From your testimony given during these proceedings, you admit to being the cause of these senseless deaths. Therefore, this court sentences you to be put to death at the earliest possible date." Spectators in the gallery burst into applause. Mayer allowed it to go on for a few moments and then banged his gavel and asked for silence. He then paused, took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. "If I could sentence you to 20 death sentences, I would, but I can't. Never in my 25 years on the bench have I presided over a more depraved series of acts by one person against his fellow human beings. You are an abomination. If there is a hell, surely you will dwell there for eternity. Bailiff, remove him from my sight." Once again, the gallery celebrated with applause. I have always considered myself to be intelligent and immune to the empty threats from babbling psychopaths, but the conviction in Morton's final words shook me to my core. 2 weeks later, I resigned and moved to a small town in the middle of Illinois, hundreds of miles from Chicago. My wife chose not to move with me. A year later, we divorced. Today, I am not a big city attorney anymore. I still practice law, but mundane stuff. I write real estate contracts, prepare wills, help couples adopt children, offer advice to the elderly to protect their assets with trusts, and on occasion take on insurance companies and wrongful death claims. While I do not practice criminal law anymore, I do help the good citizens in this town with traffic tickets and the occasional DUI. I am well known, well liked, and I even served as mayor for one term. But I stay away from anything dealing with the seamy or negative side of the human experience. I want no part of it. I do not go by Wendell anymore or Mr. Boyd. People here in town call me Jay. My efforts to forget the deeds of Aaron Morton have mostly failed. 5 years ago, his execution made national news. So did my involvement with his prosecution. And yes, I had to endure the notoriety of being involved with a nationally known serial killer for months. He is present in my nightmares, and I constantly see individuals on the street who remind me of the man. Not the disheveled, vulgar, tattooed individual I had to deal with during the trial, but the sophisticated professional I met in my office that first fateful day. I live in an old 2-story Victorian house several blocks off the main square. During the remodel, just before I moved in, I had the contractor prepare one half of the bottom floor as an office and reception area. Since I run a one-man shop, I only need a receptionist 3 days a week. Her name is Ruth. She and her husband moved to town several years ago after they retired. She worked in a large law firm in Chicago, knew my father before his passing, and jumped at the chance to work part-time for me. For the past 20 years, the name Aaron Morton had tried to dominate my every waking thought. For a number of years, it did. But since his execution, not so much. Until 2 months ago. On the 5th anniversary of his execution, Federal Express delivered a package to my office. While not an unusual occurrence, that particular day, Ruth walked into my office with a worried look on her face. "Jay, this just came for you." I looked up over my glasses and smiled. "What is it?" She held it like it might explode at any second. "It's from Newman, Peabody, and Schultz in Chicago." "So? Aren't they the ones who represented Aaron Morton at his trial?" I took off my glasses and studied the white and blue flat package she held in her hand. "Yes, I believe they did. However, from what I heard, they were not too pleased at taking him on as a client." I reached for the package and she handed it to me. While I did not check, I am sure the package measured 9.5 by 12.5, and it weighed practically nothing. Whatever might be in it would only be paper. Once opened, I extracted a printed letter and an old yellowed envelope. The computer-printed letter read, "To the Honorable J. Wendell Boyd, Attorney at Law. Our client, Aaron Morton, commissioned our firm to deliver this envelope on the prescribed date of September 1st, 5 years following his execution. Herein, with the delivery of this package, our obligation to Mr. Morton has been fulfilled." The letter contained the signature of what I suspected was a junior associate within the firm. They are the individuals who have to pay their dues by performing meaningless grunt work. I studied the yellowed envelope and turned it over. Only one side held writing. The back bore no markings. The front contained only 3 words, "To J. Boyd." I looked up at my assistant. "Thanks, Ruth. I'll open it later." "Very well. Let me know if there's anything I need to do about it." "I'm sure it's nothing, but thanks." After she left the room, I placed the envelope on my desk and just stared at it for a long time. How long, I do not remember. My first inclination was to burn it, but curiosity kept me from taking a match to it. Finally, after debating the pros and cons, I used a letter opener to slice open the top. A handwritten note fell out. It read, "On All Souls Day, I will return to make amends and settle old scores." Despite knowing there was nothing he could do to me from beyond the grave, these words sent a chill up my spine. Bile rose in the back of my throat, and I had to swallow hard to push it back down. The note did not contain a signature, but Aaron Morton created hundreds of handwritten pages about his victims. Before his trial, I forced myself to read them all. These manuscripts contained graphic depictions of how each victim died and his fascination as he watched them succumb to their injuries. After glancing at a calendar on my desk, I realized there were only 60 days available to figure out the meaning of his note. 20 years have passed since I last stepped foot in Chicago. My ex-wife remarried and moved to New York, so I did not have to worry about running into her. My appointment with the senior partner at Newman, Peabody & Schultz occurred 10 minutes late. Pretty good considering how hesitant he was when he made the appointment. After we shook hands in the reception area, Charles Newman said, "It's been a long time, Wendell. You look well." "As do you, Charles." He made no move to take me to a private office. I said, "Is there somewhere we can talk in private?" "Is this about the Morton case?" "It's about the letter I received." "I'm surprised you are asking about it. You, of all people, should know about attorney-client privilege." "I understand that, but since he's dead, makes no difference. This firm has fulfilled its obligation, and that is our final word. I just need to know how long you had the letter." "Sorry, Wendell." He folded his arms and made no offer to discuss the topic in private. I stared at him for a few moments. "Sorry I wasted your time." I turned and left the reception area and walked quickly to the bank of elevators. I pressed the down button and waited. Since we were on the 30th floor, I figured I had a bit of a wait. Before the door opened, a young man in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows joined me at the door. He followed me into the elevator, punched the button for the floor just above the lobby, and said the minute the door closed, "I'm the guy who signed the letter." I glanced at him and nodded. "We've had the letter since his conviction." "That long?" "Yes." "What other instructions did he leave?" The man handed me a folded piece of paper. "Don't open that until you are out of the building." The car stopped its descent and he stepped out, holding the door open. "I'll get fired if they find out I gave you that copy." With those words, he let the doors close. I abided by the man's wishes and did not open it until I got back to my car in the parking lot. I guess I expected a lengthy letter from Morton explaining his actions. Instead, the mystery piece of paper turned out to be a receipt of payment. A receipt for the sum of $5,000 for the delivery of 2 letters. One package needed to be delivered September 1st. The second package would be delivered the day before November 1st, All Souls Day. It specified the deliveries were to be made 5 years after the execution of Aaron Morton. To whom it would be delivered did not appear on the receipt. For that matter, neither did my name. I looked back at the tall structure containing the offices of Newman, Peabody & Schultz. I now understood why Newman invoked the attorney-client privilege clause. They still had another package to deliver. Subsequent efforts to discover what the November 1st package contained failed. No one at the law firm would return my calls, so I reread the short note in Morton's handwriting over and over, trying to determine what it might mean. My imagination filled in the parts logic could not provide. The nightmares returned with vengeance. Waking up in the middle of the night soaked from sweat and my heart thumping hard in my chest is not a good way to get a good night's sleep. After the third night of sleeplessness, Ruth noticed and told me I needed to see my doctor. Every time she mentioned it, I would thank her and indicate I would. I didn't. I started seeing Aaron Morton everywhere. The most startling event occurred on the Monday after the nightmares returned. As I washed my hands in the public restroom at the courthouse, I brought my eyes up to the mirror in front. A wild-eyed man stood behind me, his hair and pallor the same color as Morton's 20 years ago in the courtroom. I gasped. My heart started pounding. The specter stared at me. "What's your problem, man?" The voice bore no resemblance to Morton's. I quickly dried my hands and exited the restroom. But similar incidents occurred daily. October 31st has arrived, the day before November 1st, All Souls Day. The outside lights on my house are off. I do not wish to interact with anyone. I sit at my desk listening to the sounds of trick-or-treaters roaming the neighborhood. The sounds cause my imagination to run amok. A full bottle of Glenfiddich sits next to my left hand, which holds an empty glass. A Glock 19 is next to my right hand. Every time I hear the swishing of leaves outside my office window, I put my hand on the pistol. Then the laughter of children describing their bounty of the evening breaks the spell, and I release the weapon. Time drags slowly as the hustle and bustle of trick-or-treaters subsides with the lateness of the hour. The bottle is now half empty. Sweat trickles down my forehead, even though there is a chill in the house. Because I live so near, I rarely perceive when the bell in the steeple of the First Baptist Church a block from my house rings. Tonight, it sounds like a drum in my ears. I count the number of rings. 10, 11, and then 12. It is midnight. All Souls Day is here. Waiting for the unknown, waiting for the threat my imagination senses Morton will cause. My right hand clutches the Glock. Its weight and purpose provide a false sense of security. When the church bell ceases its incessant ringing, the house is oddly quiet. All lights in my office are extinguished. The only illumination comes from a streetlight outside which shines through a large window. The limbs of a huge oak tree sway in the breeze, causing eerie shadows to dance across the floor. My nerves twitch to the slightest sound. The quiet enhances the normal sounds one never hears. Branches rubbing the house, the furnace kicking on, the normal creaking of an old house, all of these create a symphony of unsettling noise. I pour another drink. Banging on the front door jars me awake. My head shoots up while my arms sweep across the desk, sending an empty bottle and glass crashing to the floor. My right hand finds the gun. I clutch it with an unsteady grip. Night has transitioned to the beginnings of dawn. The sound at the front door increases in volume and intensity. I stumble out of the office and stagger away, fleeing the perceived threat. Treading down the dimly lit hall, a figure appears, walking toward me. It is an amalgamation of all the missing body parts Aaron Morton refused to return. The face glares at me. The unblinking eyes are Morton's. I scream, pointing the pistol at the ghastly figure. I pull the trigger until it locks open. Darkness engulfs me. Voices raise me from the abyss. My eyes open to the sight of a nurse bending over me. "Welcome back, Jay. I thought we had lost you." The nurse's name is Marilyn. She is a friend. Several years prior, I won a large settlement for her after her husband was killed by a drunk driver. Occasionally, we see each other socially. Where am I? Drake County Hospital. When? Early this morning. Seems you had a bit too much to drink last night. Her head nods toward the other side of the bed. He brought you in. I turn my head. A man is standing next to the bed. I look over at him. Sheriff Martin Burton stands with his arms folded. Jay, what the hell were you doing last night? Taking a deep breath, I stop and collect my thoughts. I guess I fell asleep at my desk. I heard noises at the front door this morning and it startled me. You shot your hall mirror to smithereens. Guess we scared you, huh? You might say that. I came by to tell you the Chicago PD received a posthumous letter from Morton yesterday. The letter gave them the location of all the missing body parts. My reaction to his words must seem strange to the sheriff. I close my eyes and say, just as he wrote in his letter, he has made amends and settled old scores. The bodies are now whole. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story, They Do Come Back, penned by J.C. Fields. J.C. Fields is an award-winning and Amazon best-selling author. He is a full member of the Missouri Writers Guild and is active in numerous other writing groups. His Sean Kruger series has won numerous awards, including multiple gold and silver medals in the Reader's Favorite International Book Contest. The Imposter's Trail was awarded Best Mystery Thriller at the 2017 Ozark Indie Book Fest. In March of 2020, his novel, A Lone Wolf, became a #1 Amazon best-selling audiobook. His second novel in the series, The Last Insurgent, became a #1 Amazon new release in January 2021. All of the aforementioned books can be found on audible.com, narrated by yours truly. If you'd like to learn more about J.C. Fields, you can reach out to him at jcfieldsbooks.com. That's jcfieldsbooks.com. Or bookbub.com/authors/J-C-Fields. You can also reach him at facebook.com/jcfieldsbooks. Sometimes you just need to get away for a while, collect your thoughts, and enjoy the peace and quiet that only nature can provide. However, there are times that nature doesn't want you in its domain. Some places remember a world before humanity stepped into the woods, and those places are only too eager to show you that you don't belong there. You are a trespasser, and if you try to forget that, nature will remind you. So, come stay at our cabin in the woods, but make sure you have your affairs in order first. It's getting dark. I don't know, man. The cabin is really far out there, and you'd be alone until Sunday. All right, if it'll help you get over this thing with Sam, you can stay at the cabin for the weekend. Just, remember what it's like. Things are different in the Appalachians. It's beautiful up there, but it can be really weird sometimes. When we were kids, my parents handled the weird for us, but now it's different. Make sure you're inside after dark. Once the sun is behind the hills, just call it good for the day. There are a lot of wild animals out there that wander around in the dark, and I don't want you getting hurt. I'm serious about this, Scott. Stay inside after dark. Don't even go out on the porch. Sometimes, this is going to sound strange, but sometimes the animals can sound a little like people. You might think you hear yelling or screaming, but it's just animal noises. Don't go out looking for whatever is making the noise. You're just going to get lost or hurt. I was rerunning Brian's words through my head for the 30th time. It was a weird talk to get before borrowing his cabin for the weekend, and as always, I couldn't quite tell if Brian was joking around or if he was just being cringy. Once he tried to convince us all that he was being hunted by Bigfoot. He was my best friend, but he had his quirks. This little speech was the pinnacle of Brian theatrics. Scott, you can't let anyone inside. I know this is fucking weird, but don't let anyone into the cabin, okay? You're the only one who is up there, and there is no one else within walking distance. If someone is at your door and you don't see my car parked out next to yours, then they are not someone who belongs at the cabin. No matter what they say, don't let them in. Fuck, don't talk to them. Don't even acknowledge them. Shut the shutters if you need to. Pull the blinds. You should be fine if you stay inside after dark. Anything you forget to do outside can be finished the next day. Other than that, Just keep the place clean and I'll come up to see you on Sunday, all right? There is satellite TV up there, but you're only going to get cell signal clear enough to make a call from the far left corner of the balcony off of the master bedroom, and sometimes not even there. There are a shit ton of DVDs up there, books, and there is a beautiful creek out back beyond the patio. You remember, right? We used to catch salamanders. Get your head back together and relax. I love you, man. Shit, Brian, what kind of talk was that? I'd been expecting something along the lines of, if you use the hot tub, be sure to put the cover back on, or don't leave food outside, it might attract critters. This warning about people who might show up at the door was not only weird, but a little creepy. I half suspected that he was trying to freak me out, but Brian wouldn't do that while I was hurting, and he knew this breakup with Sam was hard on me. We had been together for 6 years, and things had ended badly enough that there wasn't going to be a reconciliation. It was hard to think of going forward without her, but this trip up to the woods wasn't about that. It was about remembering what it meant to be me. I had to remember what it was like to be my own person, and I couldn't do that in a place where everything reminded me of the last 6 years. Brian's cabin was perfect. I'd gone up several times when we were younger. When Brian's parents had moved out west, they had left the cabin for him, but we rarely went up anymore. We'd come fishing once, but Brian said the place gave him the creeps, and then he had made a reference to the Bigfoot stuff he had talked about when he was a kid. I keep the place up and it's beautiful, but I just don't feel safe there. You remember the Bigfoot? Yeah, it can get dangerous. Well, Bigfoot or no, I was planning on having a weekend unplugged from the world. I was going to go for some walks, do some reading, and find some headspace that was distinctly mine. Then Sunday I'd get drunk with Brian and we'd sober up overnight and go back to the city on Monday. The long weekend couldn't have hit at a better time. A deer skittered off into the woods as I pulled my car up to the cabin, the rocks of the driveway popping beneath my tires. The minute I stepped out of the car, I was hit by a cacophony of smells that sparked a strong sense of nostalgia. The woods had a world of smells all its own, a mix of natural decay and natural growth, backed by a cleanness you just didn't get in the city. Brian and I had some good memories of this place. I popped the trunk and grabbed my duffel bag along with a box of foodstuffs I'd picked up, and then nearly tripped over a small calico cat with a bad limp and a wheezy rattle to its breathing. Damn it! I cursed as I took a wider step than I'd meant to in order to avoid putting my foot down on the attention-starved little animal. It weaved in and out between my legs as I made my way up to the doorway. Someone is going to step on you someday and then you'll really be limping, I told it with no real malice. I reached the front door without killing the cat and then ducked under the short stairs to grab the hidden false rock. I pulled the key out and unlocked the door, then put the key back. Brian had once told me they could leave the key taped to the door and no one would break in up here, but just for the sake of caution, it was hidden away oh so cleverly. The door opened into a slightly musty wide-open sitting area. The cabin had a main floor with a couple of bedrooms, and then a loft with a couple more bedrooms that overlooked the primary living room and kitchen. All right, get in and out from underfoot, I told the cat, and it dashed into the house and bounded up the stairs going about some business that was only for cats to know. I sighed and walked inside. The switch for the electricity was in a panel on the wall to the left, so I flipped that and some small accent lights came on all over both inside and outside of the house. I shut the box back up before going around and opening all the windows and turning on the fans. The solar panels had filled the batteries, so we had plenty of juice for the weekend, especially with as little as I intended to do. I went to the guest bedroom and tossed my things on the floor before I flopped down on the bed and looked up at the ceiling. It was like falling into my past. Suddenly, I was enveloped in a simpler time in my life. Brian and I had folded board games out across this bed and played them until one or the other of us had started cheating, and the game devolved into each of us making new and more broken rules that made the game pointless to play. It was dumb, but it was also a great way to spend a weekend. We had laughed, and it hadn't mattered who won or lost. Either way, we were going to abandon the game eventually and end up crawling through the creek out back so we could track mud inside. That was the tradition. I remembered a night when we had stayed up extra late, tucked into a fort we had made of blankets, chairs, and pillows. We had shone the flashlight out the bedroom window and pretended to see things hiding in the woods until Brian's parents had closed the shutters and told us to go to bed. They had been really angry with us, and I couldn't figure out why. Brian said we weren't supposed to be playing after dark, but his parents had never cared when we stayed up late at his regular house. Once I had gotten older, I told myself that his parents were probably trying to sneak out and fool around in the hot tub out back, and we had been messing things up with our games. Brian swore it was to make sure we didn't attract Bigfoot. This was a running theme for him, his perpetual fear of Bigfoot at the cabin. We'd gotten so riled up that it took forever to fall asleep that night. It'd only been after Brian started singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to me like I was a baby that I had finally fallen asleep. I chuckled to myself. Nostalgia was a hell of a drug. My bag didn't take long to unpack, and then I went to the kitchen and put away the food I had brought with me. When I was done, the fridge had some drinks and some lunch meat for sandwiches, as well as a few other quick snacks. After this, I checked the time and, seeing that it was too early for Brian to be home yet, grabbed my book to read for a while. The next thing I knew, I was startled awake by the sound of something heavy falling over upstairs. I jumped up from the couch and looked out the window to see that the sun was on its way down, and I hadn't yet called Brian to let him know I got in safely. I cursed myself and headed upstairs to the master balcony to call Brian. I looked around to see what had fallen while I was up there, and I found that a drawer from the left nightstand next to the bed had fallen to the ground and scattered its contents across the floor. It wasn't a large mess, but I decided I'd take care of it after I made my call. I pulled out my cell phone, noticing that the battery was already down to 15%. Driving up into the countryside was rough on cell phones since they spent most of their time trying to find a signal. I had meant to turn it off when I arrived to save charge, but clearly I'd failed. I'd have to find my charger. I walked to the far left corner of the porch and watched the bars on my phone. 2, 2, 2, 3. All right, we were in business. I quickly dialed Brian. The phone rang and then dropped the call once, and I had to dial him back again. This time it connected. Scott? Everything? His greeting was cut off by static. I made it safely. I'm already settled in. Sorry I'm contacting you so late. I fell asleep on the couch for a minute, I admitted with a small laugh. This place just relaxes me, I guess. If your cat hadn't knocked over... Did... say... Scott's voice popped and crackled. Brian, you repeat... I fell asleep on the couch and your cat woke me up. I spoke the words at a slower pace and a bit louder as though the volume of my voice might make the signal stronger. Cat? No, Scott. Cat. Get it? I could barely make out what he was saying. Something about the cat. Maybe the cat wasn't his. You're breaking up. Do you want me to put the cat out? I tried to clarify. No, cat. Get it out of the house now. Hurry, Scott. It's getting dark. Son, get out now. He was clear for a bit, and then it all went to shit again. Okay, I'm getting the cat out. Sorry, I figured it was yours. As I finished this last sentence, the phone cut off abruptly. I tried to call Scott back a couple more times and only managed to get a few words through before the line faltered again. He seemed really upset about the cat. Maybe it had fleas or something, or maybe it tore up the furniture. Either way, he wanted it out, so I had to find the thing and give it the boot. Poor little thing could barely walk. I decided I'd be gentle about it. I looked over at the sunset. The sky was cast in shades of pink, purple, and orange. The top edge of the sun was just above the horizon, and I really couldn't think of a more beautiful sight. But rather than enjoy the view, I had to find and evict the cat. Here, kitty, kitty, I called out in my most benign voice as I looked around the master bedroom. Clearly it had been in here at some point. It must have been responsible for knocking the drawer from the nightstand. I bent down and began picking up the scattered items. There was chapstick and tissues, a bunch of cough drops, and a sleeping mask. There was also a heavy box that I recognized as a gun locker. It was still secure, so I slipped it back into the drawer and fitted the drawer into the nightstand again. The sound of shattering glass caused me to jump and curse as I spun on the open door at my back. The cat was downstairs and breaking things. Great. Now I'd have to explain that to Brian when I talk to him again. Kitty, come on, don't be a jerk. It's not like I'm the one who wants to evict you, I said playfully as I stepped from the room onto the loft overhang. I looked downstairs. There was broken glass on the floor in the kitchen. It looked like several jars of preserves had been pushed from the counter. Well, cats were cats, and apparently this one was letting me know that he was not happy with the decision to evict. I started down the stairs and was about halfway down when the lights went out. The hitherto brightly lit cabin was suddenly dark, cast red by the fading light of a dwindling day. Had the batteries already depleted? Normally, there was plenty of power to last a weekend as long as we weren't doing anything crazy. I went further down the stairs and heard the sound of claws scrabbling across hardwood flooring. It moved from near the front door, just at the base of the stairs, and then back into the kitchen area. "Did you turn the lights out, Kitty?" I joked, momentarily spooked. You never want to be afraid of stupid stories, but it was getting dark, and the lengthening shadows had sunk their teeth into the cabin's insides, spilling darkness across the once serene landscape. It was easy to imagine all kinds of horrors under those circumstances, especially with Brian's paranoid warnings still fresh on the mind. I hesitated as I reached the breaker panel. It was open. Had I left it open after turning on the power? Maybe. I grabbed my phone to use the flashlight on it and then remembered I'd turned that off. Shit. I could turn it back on, but I didn't really want to just for this. Something thumped in one of the downstairs bedrooms and I paused for a moment. Damned cat was still on its path of terror. I reached into the switch box and felt around. The natural light, what little of it remained, was fading quickly. There were 3 small switches and 1 main. I let my hand pass over them, trying to figure out what was in the wrong place. They all felt fine, so I clicked each one in turn. Nothing. I huffed in agitation and moved my hand down to check the fuses themselves. I could tell immediately that something was wrong. The fuses weren't in place. What the? I knelt down and felt around on the ground, thinking they must have fallen out or something. A door shut behind me and I jumped back to my feet, spinning around and slamming my back to the wall. "Who's there?" I called, my hands scrambling for the handle to the exit. There wasn't a reply, but I was just startled enough to run out onto the front porch anyway. I pulled the cabin door closed behind me and stared into the dark front window as though I honestly expected someone else to be in there. I was shaking a little and I laughed nervously to myself. I had spooked myself. The windows were open. A door had blown closed and I had let myself get jumpy. Just the same, I took a few moments to catch my breath and walk off some of the nervous energy. That's when I saw the deer. There were 2 of them in the flatter area near my car. They stood watching me just at the edge of my field of vision. I held very still, surprised they hadn't fled as soon as I came outside. Their heads were turned in my direction. I could see the glare off their eyes in the dim light cast from the moon, the light round shimmering like 2 floating orbs of silver spun menace. One of the deer moved, turning in my direction, and it did so in a way that made me think it might have been hurt in an accident. The legs bent oddly, and it slumped and shifted as though someone had mixed up all of its bones and muscles, and it was just learning to use them again. It was such a faltering, unnatural motion that it immediately sent a chill down my back. Brian's words floated up through my memory. "I'm serious about this, Scott. Stay inside after dark. Don't even go out on the porch." I found myself suddenly eager to take his advice. I quickly moved back inside, locking the front door behind me. The deer were still watching me. "Scott." The single syllable of my name froze me in place as it swept to me from somewhere inside the house. This time I reached for my phone and turned it on. I held up the screen as it booted up, shining the minimal light across the room. The sound had come from behind the closed door to the guest bedroom I was staying in. I held still, trying to keep completely silent. My breathing felt too loud, and then my phone's boot-up sound chimed, and I was startled so badly I dropped it on the ground. I briefly saw a missed text message on the screen. "Scott!" The voice again, this time louder. I turned, about to run outside again, but then something moved on the porch. a large shadow sweeping across the front windows. "Scott, let us in." A voice that sounded just like Brian's came from off to one side of the door outside. I grabbed my phone off the ground and took off running upstairs, and I didn't stop until I was in the master bedroom with the door shut and locked behind me. My hands were shaking now, and my mind was trying to catch up with what was happening. What the fuck was outside? What had I let inside? I looked down at my phone and read as my eyes passed over the missed text message. "Get out of the house before the sun is down. Get in your car and leave," the message from Brian read. Then a few minutes later there was another. "Are you out?" And then, "I'm on my way. I'll be there in an hour." I typed up a quick reply and hit send. "What are these things?" I asked, and after a few moments the message reported that it hadn't been sent. "I'm trapped in the master bedroom." I tried to send that as well, though it wasn't going through yet. The stairs up to the loft creaked. I charged across to the nightstand and pulled out the gun lockbox, upending the drawer to try and find the key. It wasn't in with the lockbox, but I thought that was where Brian kept it. I turned to cross to the other side of the bed and try that nightstand, and that's when I saw the deer standing on the second-story balcony looking in through the windows, except it wasn't a deer. Not really. The face appeared to be the right shape at first, but it was too long and narrow, and there was only one antler rising up from the center of its head, like some kind of unicorn gone mad. The antler almost looked like a skeletal hand. The silver shimmering eyes were perfectly round, and it was standing on its hind legs, nearly 8 feet tall as it leaned against the glass with forelimbs that ended in something like a cross between hooves and hands. "Can I come in? It's cold." A little girl's voice drifted through the glass. "Cold," it repeated, then it shrieked, "Help me! Help!" The voice was piercing and loud, like a woman screaming for her life. I fell over myself, backing away from the glass, and the thing watched me the entire time. I had a sudden understanding that it couldn't come in on its own. It was like some kind of shape-shifting nightmare vampire. It needed my permission to enter. But I had already let one in. The cat was the same kind of thing. I knew it. "Scott, I miss you." Sam's voice came from the other side of the bedroom door. Things clicked in my head then. Brian's warning made sense, and all those years he had told me that there was a Bigfoot at the cabin, it had actually been these things. How long had his family lived up here knowing that these things existed? Follow the rules and everything is fine, but I had broken the rules as soon as I arrived. I huddled up next to the bed on the opposite side from the one at the window, in a place I hoped it couldn't see me. "Scott, I love you. Open up, honey." Sam's voice called from the other side of the door again, and it was perfect. Whatever finesse the horror lacked in physical appearance, it imitated Sam's voice perfectly. Where did it even get that from? She'd never been here. I didn't answer. I wanted it to think that I was already gone. The door handle jiggled. Silence fell, and I held absolutely still. I waited in the dark and time crawled on. How long would it be until Brian got here? He'd know what to do. I wanted to look at my phone, but I was too afraid to move. The door handle jiggled again, and then something slammed into it repeatedly. 3 percussive blows that rattled the frame. "Scott, honey. Scott, I love you." The voice was sickeningly sweet, almost mocking. Things grew quiet again, and I stayed huddled in the corner, shaking. After some time, I heard movement across the loft, and then the sound of something moving quickly down the stairs. A moment later, the front door of the cabin opened and then slammed shut. I didn't react immediately, but after several minutes, I got up the nerve to look over the bed and out the glass window of the sliding door onto the rear balcony. The deer thing was gone. I let out a shaky sigh of relief and looked down at my phone. It had been a little over an hour since Brian said he'd be here. I got up carefully and moved to the door to see if I could hear anything. A loud reverberating gunshot caused me to jump, and without even thinking, I ran for the door. Brian was here, and he had brought a gun. I flew down the stairs and could see the light from his headlights spilling in the front windows. "Brian, I called for him as I reached the front door and threw it open, only to come grinding to a halt. Brian was lying on the ground a few feet from the porch, his head mostly torn free of the rest of his body. 3 of the deer-like creatures hovered over him, shadows strewn from the headlights behind them, swinging their heads down to rip pieces of meat from his body in large chunks. Their clawed forelimbs held the corpse as they ate, looking up at me between bites. The shotgun lay to one side, barrel smoking, my friend's hand still wrapped around the stock, though it was not connected to the rest of the arm. My bottom lip quivered as revulsion and horror raced through me. I staggered back a step, and then Brian's voice came from directly behind me. It wasn't his adult voice, but the voice of a much younger Brian. I still recognized it. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. When the blazing sun is gone, when he nothing shines upon, then you show your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night. I hope you enjoyed It's Getting Dark, as written by Heath Pfaff and performed by yours truly, Paul J. McSorley. To find more from Heath Pfaff, please visit simplyscarypodcast.com/Pfaff, spelled P-F-A-F-F, and you'll be redirected to his author profile on our horror fiction website, creepypastastories.com, where you'll find ways to follow him on his website of foxesmind.com. That's OFFOXSMIND.com, as well as a link to his work on Amazon.com by clicking his Amazon link on that profile. A small portion of your purchase goes to us here at Chilling Tales, where we are proud Amazon affiliates, to help make this show possible. If you enjoyed tonight's story, hosted by yours truly, Paul J. McSorley, you can search my name on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on YouTube for additional previous stories. If you'd like to hear more lengthy tales, be sure to take a look at my audiobooks. Available now on audible.com, or just visit paulsbooks.net. That's PAULSBOOKS.net. You can also find me personally on Facebook and Twitter. And with that, listeners, our weekly journey into the psyche has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for tonight's episode, and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find an archive of our work going back to 2012. And consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content ad-free. I'm your host for Fear from the Heartland, Paul J. McSorley. I've enjoyed the titillation tonight. Ooh, there's that word again. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again next week at Fear from the Heartland.